So next part is generated content. Generated content is kind of cool, and we'll show you by the end of this session why it's cool, but we're first going to show you how to use it. So generated content, well, let me just highlight this. So I'm highlighting this whole sentence, right? You saw me highlight that? I started from the left, I'm going to do that again. Start over here, I highlight, and you see that only the center part gets selected? Because this part that I can't select, the before content is generated, and the after content is generated. So visually you can see them, right? But they are not part of the DOM. So you can't highlight it, you can't manipulate it with JavaScript. But you can completely, totally style it with CSS as if it was a div on the page. So how does it work? You do p before, or anything before, and the only required attribute is content. And we'll talk about what goes in there in a bit. But you can style it. So you see here I did font weight bold. And after content is dash after content, and the font weight's bold. So here we have the paragraph, and it says the content. And when I put the after and before pseudo elements on it, I get before content dash, which is bold. Then I get the content, which is the original stuff from the paragraph. And then I get the after content. And this is when you're thinking about this in your brain, think about it this way. So this is not a real element, and this does not appear in the DOM, but this is just for thinking about it. There's a pseudo element, the before pseudo element, and the after pseudo element. So after and before don't really exist. This is just to show you. Because you can style before and after completely as if it was a div on the page. So here we're going to, this is one of the play with pages, so you can play along. But like, bananas are yummy, right? And so when I highlight this, only the word are gets highlighted, because the other two don't exist. Because I ate them already for breakfast. But look, I can actually make this font weight bold, right? That made it bold. Position absolute. Not the best idea just to do that, but top -1em. Bring it up above it. Oops. That was supposed to be 1. Where'd it go? Oh. Let's make it relative. That way at least you'll see it happen. Because oh, I can do this. There. Now you can see the bananas. It was being relative to the whole document before. Or positioned absolutely. So bananas are yummy. I can style it. I can do WebKit transform, rotate 180 degrees, and they're an upside down bananas. So we'll learn transform later on, but basically you can style it like you would any other element with the exception of animation. Animation right now on pseudo elements is supported in Mozilla. I think they're adding it to the spec that you can actually do it on any element, but for right now you can't animate them, but maybe we can later on. So does that make sense about how stylable it is and stuff? So basically what's happening is you get 2 free stylable elements, which are not DOM nodes, for every non-empty element. And by non-empty element, I mean a non-replaced element, which means I'm an element that does not get replaced by a UI feature. So an input text box looks like a box. Before and after, where would that go? You can't put before and after pseudo elements on an empty element like that, or an image. It will work in some browsers, but it won't work exactly how you thought. Like because if you noticed here, when I do a before and I do an after, this is the paragraph, right? The before is actually inside the paragraph. It's before the content of that element, or after the content of that element. So when you think before and after in your head, you're probably thinking before the P and after the P, but it's actually within the P. Does that make sense to people? And is that new to people, like they didn't know that? Because I kind of was like, oh, I didn't know that when I figured that out a long time ago, but whatever. So generally, if you were going to position everything absolutely in terms of z-index, this is your paragraph in red. If you were to put a span around the content, it would be in the middle here. The before comes before it, the after comes after it. And this is slightly different than when you're looking, my image is different than the one that's in the WC3 specifications, because I find this easier to read than what they have, and it looks slightly different, and you're kind of like, it's conflicting, but it's not really conflicting if you read the spec. So the only attribute that is required when you find when you include the before and after pseudo element is the content. That's required. It can be empty like this, but it has to be there, because otherwise you're not styling anything. There's no content to be styled. So what can you put in there? You can put empty, you can put any type of text you want. You can put Unicode characters in there. If you declare your style sheet to be UTF-8, you can actually put the character in your, I think that's a snowman, I'm not sure. And you can actually do attributes. So when an element has an attribute on it, you can pull out the value of that attribute and add that to the page. And then you can do counters. And I'm going to show in another slide how to do counters. Counter name and then counter. Then when you include counters, you have to actually increment it by that name. So, special characters. There's some fun characters here. Let's go to that. So let's do the lesbian character, because that one's new and I never saw it before there. Control C. And we go here. No. We go to the, oh. Apparently this does not open a new window, which it should have. There we go. So if I put that in here, I convert it. And then I take this and I go back here and I put it here. And shoot. I lost it, oh no. Okay, so let me just do, you can actually put this in anywhere. Darn. Okay, so I lost it. Let's just do 2603 because that's easy. So you can, so that's a snowman. I could have copied the snowman. I could put either one in there. Let me go back to copy paste character, but I'm going to open it in a new window. Sorry, copy paste character. Snowmen are sad. Wrong deck. Okay. If I put this here, just the sad right there, because I declared UTF-8 on this document, it works fine as well. But the cool thing is that if you can use either one. So if you don't think this is going to work because it's not UTF-8, you can also use that character set. So what other things can we use? Okay, so we have this little converter here. If you want to actually use the calculator is in my GitHub. So if you just want to like link to it or whatever, put a bookmark because you want to convert things. I use copy paste character all the time. Plug it in here, convert it, and then I use it in my JavaScript because I'd rather use my the conversion value. Okay, so I'm just gonna, numeric is, let's just do 4890, see if that works, convert. What is it, 2811?
You have to hit the other convert. The one below numeric
Oh,
value.
that's why. Thank you, because I'm an idiot. Okay, that's why it's not working. 281 convert. There we go. That's an odd character. I don't know what that character is. Let's try it out. So you see here, I just put a hexadecimal value in. It converted it for me. And then the only difference between JavaScript and CSS is in JavaScript you put a U for Unicode. So that way, at least you understand what that means. So those are special characters. So the values can either be the key terms of none, which is, you're like, why do you need none? Because sometimes you have it on everything and then you want to overwrite 3 of them and put none. So that's one use of none. Normal is basically the same as none. String, you can put any string you want, like I showed you. You can actually put an image. So you can do URL. You can put a background image just like you would any other element on your page. But actually, this would be a content, except for it wouldn't be part of the DOM. So you put a URL the same as you declare a background image, but it actually would appear like a foreground. And you could put a background image on top of that. So you could put, whatever you want to do.
So as far as like background, you mentioned background image. Can you use that for spriting? Or, can you limit what's shown there, or is it just?
So I use that all the time for spriting.
Okay.
So do you guys know what sprites are? Everyone? Yep, okay. So, you have a sprite of all of these fade icons, let's say, and it's a travel site, let's say, and you have Travelocity, you have Priceline, you have Google reviews, Yelp reviews, and you want to put the icon of those different companies in. So you can either put little icon in the page, or if you don't care about IE7, because IE7 does not support generated content, and I tend not to care about IE7 because I do mostly mobile, I would put a generated content of before, and I actually wouldn't put the URL, because the URL would actually be an image. Instead, I would put a background image. So I would say that my content equals empty, my height is 16 pixels, my width is 16 pixels, I'm display inline block, so that it appears inline block, because otherwise it's just display inline, and when something's display inline, before and after by definition are inline, but in appearance. So if you want to put a width on something, you can't if it's inline. So I put inline block. And then I put the background image of my sprite, and then I say background position, -32, -64, if it's Google, and that's where the icon is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, instead of using image though, I would use a background image, and I would just use empty content. 99.9% of the time where I do generated content, it's empty. And I'll show you in a little bit more. Then we have counters, and counters are a little bit complex. I'll talk about them in a second. Open quote and close quote, and this is kind of important for quotes, the Q tag, because you want to match the language, usually. Q is supposed to match the language of the page, because let's say in the United States, you have the double quotes, and then if there's a quote inside the quote, it's a single quote, right? And they're curly. In French, when you have quotes, you have quotes, and then if you have a quote inside a quote, I think you have a double left arrow and double right arrow. I'm not sure. I only speak French. I don't actually know how to read it or write it, which is kind of weird. But different languages have different quotations, and so you can actually say exactly what quotes you want to use. And then you can put attribute. An attribute, I'm in the middle of writing a blog post on the attribute, because attribute is going to be greatly expanded soon. It's not well supported yet, but right now you can only include in all browsers an actual attribute value pair. You put the attribute name inside there, and it will actually pull out the attribute value and present that. But you can actually do things like color, or let's say you do a data size. So you would put attribute data size px, and it would actually add a px at the end. So if your data size said 5, you would put pixel. It would be 5 pixels and stuff like that. So that's coming down the pipe, but is not yet supported. So attribute is actually going to be very robust. So let me go over counter. So counters, you know counters very well from ordered lists, right? They count for you. It's very simple. Ordered lists are not the only things that you can count. But other things on the page that you're counting are done with the generated content of a counter. So what you do is you come up, you create your own name for your counter. You make it up. In this case, I've used the name sections. So in my body, I reset the sections counter. Counter reset sections. And then for every H1 that has the class of section title that is inside a header, I'm very specific for some reason. I have no clue why I did that specific in this example. But before those H1s that have the class of section title that is inside a header, I say parts and then counter sections. And so this one will actually count for me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I can tell it what type of counter I want it to be as well. It doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It can actually be I didn't mark down the attribute because I can actually say, I want snowflakes. I want to count in snowflakes. Why not? And then counter increment. If I don't include counter increment, it's always going to stay at 1. So you always increment. So I have a whole blog post on this, and it's right at the tutorial. And I wrote that 4 years ago, and I totally don't remember what it says. So. But it was accurate 4 years ago, and it's pretty much, it was an old spec then, so it's valid now. Let's just open it up. So when I told you that, that my blog is boring, like this is way too much information on counter, but it's the whole spec with all the information you could possibly want. And the browser support, apparently I did it when Safari 4 was in beta that I wrote this, but it was starting to have support, so you can pretty much be rest assured that these browsers now support it, but IE6 and IE7 never will, but IE8 did support it. So this is obviously one of those pages that I have not touched since 2009. It's a little bit old, but it does have all the instructions. It's basically my blog. I should entitle it, I read the spec so you don't have to. So let's close out that. So that is the counter. Then, so attribute. Oh, I did. Look, I actually did include it. So this is the old school. You could just include the attribute name, and this is supported everywhere since IE8. In CSS3, we've added this, and it's not fully supported yet, but you can actually put an attribute name, and then a unit, and a fallback. So here, that example that I gave, would be the width would be the attribute of data count. So it's actually not, you can use the attribute, it doesn't have to be in generate content in the future. This is not well supported yet. And these are the different things you can use and a little explanation. So I'm not going to go in depth with that because it has nothing to do with generated content, but I didn't want to pull that aside in. Okay, so let's try it out. If you guys just want to play with this, this is the same thing that you saw earlier. Generate some characters. Get the hang of this. I'll give you just 2 minutes to do this. And I'll answer any questions if anyone has any questions. So.